Hi everyone, I'm Graeme Richardson-Locke, FESPA's Technical Manager. Welcome to the fourth in our series of FESPA Coffee Breaks. If you're with us for the previous discussions, you'll be clear about what I do at FESPA. But if this is the first time that you're joining, I'd like to let you know that I've spent the last 35 years working in screen and large format digital printing. I joined the industry in 1984 as a trainee printer, and my career has developed through management and directorships in point of sale, textiles and military electronics production before joining FESPA in my current role. I've been a believer in the value of professional networking for decades and know that my skills have been greatly enhanced by attending countless events and seminars that in many cases have been supported by FESPA. As an international specialty print trade federation, we continue to focus on knowledge sharing and community building across the screen and wide format digital print landscape. From FESPA's foundation in 1962, its purpose has been to reinvest profits for the benefit of its members and the wider community. We aim to keep this session today to about 45 minutes, as we understand that your time is precious. And we hope that you'll benefit from your involvement and that you'll find some useful tips to build on that will support your progress in a challenging market. Before we delve into today's session, I think it's worth reflecting on the complexities of print production. Some materials, shrink when printed, which may be fine if it's a poster, but if you're printing multi-panel murals, it can create significant issues. If you think you can wrap a vehicle with cheap monomeric vinyl and get away with it, you soon discover a host of problems. Or print floor graphics without the correct finish, it's likely to go very wrong. The point is, we're the ones who are responsible for the quality of our products, as we're the trusted experts. If you want to provide reliable quality, you need to ensure you apply the right technical knowledge to make it happen. So on to our discussion today. The value comes from measuring the right things that lead to predictable, low-risk production. I'm now going to share with you the topic slide for today, in which we're going to look at process control and how PressSign 10 scores your print quality and helps you to progress. Measuring a simple color bar reveals the truth, and reports give the feedback on how to fine-tune the color on your inkjet or screen presses. I'm now going to share with you our panelists slide. And of course, I'm delighted to welcome Paul Sherfield of the Missing Horse Consultancy for his second FESPA Coffee Break. And for his first, Fred Thornton, who's technical sales consultant at Bodoni Systems, the developer of PressSign. Firstly, Paul, please introduce yourself, followed by you, Fred, so that we can understand a bit more about your experience in the sector.
Thank you, Graeme. You didn't repeat yourself too much from the previous coffee breaks.
I tried not to.
Yes, well, I'm pleased to be back for the second coffee break. This is a natural follow-on from the one we had on colour management and colour managed workflows and process control in general 3 or 4 weeks ago. My name is Paul Sherfield. I run a consultancy in the UK called the Missing Horse Consultancy. It looks at all things in colour and colour workflows and PDFs and proofing and process control, how you get it right on the press. Before that, my background was in the printing industry all my life. My father was a printer, mainly in pre-press, some sales, and I spent a few years in print buying for companies like Marks and Spencer's and SO Petroleum. In the UK, in common with my two panelists, Graeme and Fred, I'm a member of the ISO TC 130 Shadow Committee, which puts the UK's view on printing standards. And I actually also represent the UK on 2 of the international standard committees. I'm FESPA's colour ambassador, and the rest of the time I try to earn a living.
Thank you, Paul. Fred, tell us a bit about yourself, please.
Thanks very much, Graeme. Thanks for inviting me to this coffee break today. My name's Fred Thornton. I have been working for Bodoni Systems for just under 15 years now. Bodoni Systems has been at the forefront of colour management really since inception. We've been in the graphic arts industry for 30 years, selling image setters, Harlequin rips, drum scanners, proofing systems. And just before I started with the company, we started helping printers to implement ISO 12647 by training them how to do it. What we found at that point, so 2004, 2005, and then just after when I started, we found that there weren't really the tools available to make it easy. So we developed our own in PressSign, and we've been selling that successfully since, with something in the region of 10,000 users worldwide. I also sit on the BPAF's standards committee, which is chaired by Paul. So I try to help put something back into the process to help move things forwards.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Before we get into the questions in today's topic, I'd like to ask you all please to take a minute to complete the poll that I'm about to launch, which will just tell us a little bit about what businesses you're involved with, so that it kind of guides us on on where you're from. So I'll leave that open for about a minute so that you can take your time, and I'll have a little sip of my tea in the meantime. Okay, the numbers are coming in. We have nearly 80% digital printers, but we've got a good cohort of screen printers in as well today, some in garment textile. In fact, a pretty representative cross-section of the industry. So thank you very much for doing that. So without further delay, let's start with the first question. What is product process control? I'm going to throw this over to Paul to start.
Thanks, Graeme. Well, it's the final part of a colour managed workflow. If, as a printer, be it screen or digital, you have taught your clients how to give you wonderful files to your standard, Illustrator files, PDF files, to suit your presses, to suit your substrates, or you have the systems in to amend his files to be in the right color space for all your substrates. If you've calibrated your presses and got good device profiles, which are key to a digital press, or your screen presses have the right dot gain curves built in to the screens, then you're ready to print and print accurately. Printing the expected, as Fogra very cleverly call it. And you want to match proofs. You want a job to look today like it's going to look tomorrow. You want to reprint that may be printed on a different wide format press to look the same as it was printed 3 weeks ago on a differing press, because you'll be printing on the same materials. So all your colour management is in check. But how do you prove your printed result is correct? Do you put it under a light box and match it and go, well, it doesn't look too bad, or it looks brilliant? But how do you prove it? And process control is the way of proving it. It's validating your sheets to the chosen printing condition. It could be an ISO profile from one of the ISO standards. You might be printing to the widest gamut you can possibly get off your wide format inkjet devices. And so you might be printing fine art prints using this method. How do you check? Well, systems such as Bodoni PressSign give you the ability to measure a very small color bar or even a large colour bar if you can get one on the sheet or the printed product, and check it against the requirements of your chosen printed standard or profile, and give you a report. That report can be very, very interesting, and we'll discuss that later in a way you can use it. But these systems aren't expensive, and they are the final link in a colour managed workflow. The ability to prove that your product meets the expectations of your client, and the ability to prove to your client that it does.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. I think that was a pretty comprehensive explanation there. Fred, I'm not sure whether there's anything actually that you can add to that, but I have to invite you to see if you can before we move on to the next question.
Indeed, I was thinking the same thing, but I think the only thing I can add is to say that you can't control a process unless you measure it. Understand where you are, where you need to be, and then do something about it in between. And PressSign gives you a tool to do that. Now, what we're talking about is we're talking about qualitative assessment rather than subjective. We've all been on press, we've all watched printers look at jobs and, as Paul says, essentially just decide that it looks right based on what they think. A lot of customers now won't accept that, and we want to avoid that where at all possible.
I think also in the wide format space, it's fair to say that there are many customers that don't necessarily have the clarity on quality expectations, but that doesn't mean to say that as printers, we can't take advantage of that and prove to customers our point of differentiation being that we are in control of our processes and what we produce. I'm going to move on to the second part of the topic, which is what are its benefits to printers and their clients. And again, I think, Paul, I'm going to start with you and then move on to Fred.
Well, just continuing from what Fred and I said before, it's proving your printed product is correct. Any other industry will have all sorts of quality assurance methods on the product that goes out of the door. You know, proving things, testing things right the way through the production process. And the final part of that is testing and proving that the final product is correct and to specification. You know, and this is quite a well-known technique in the offset industry. And it will become more of a requirement in the wide format, within the textile area, within all the areas that FESPA cover. And it's not a huge investment, as I'm certain Fred will go into later. So it's proving the printed product is correct. I mean, I'll just come down to two other areas and let Fred come in on the rest of it.
Sure.
It's an excellent diagnostic tool, even if you don't report to your client. As I was saying before, you have your color management workflows set up in your digital front ends. You have good device profiles describing all your substrates, and you have a simulation profile because you want to match an offset press, for instance. So you check your printed product against that. And if you don't get a good report, which Fred will go into, if you don't get a good score, and you'll see what that means later, it says that your press is not printing properly, and it gives you a number of options in your own mind to put it right. So it's an excellent diagnostic tool. I mean, in the digital world, the first thing you do is go back in and recalibrate. And if that doesn't bring your press into shape, then you know you've got to make a new device profile. It is those final tools within that color managed workflow. And it's the right first time system. You would hope most of the time that your presses will be correct, but it gives you the ability to check them. Fred.
Yeah, one point about the right first time scenario, which is quite interesting to think about. It's not like you have to do this all of the time. If you have a well-maintained machine that's configured properly, it may well stay quite stable from day to day. But you don't know that unless you actually test it regularly. So that's just an aside from what you were saying. But in terms of what it offers the printer, so yes, you can check the quality of possibly every print or every job that you do, which means that the color is more accurate and more consistent, which means that we will have happier customers. If you're providing a quality product that is consistent from day to day, from week to week, you will be able to either go out and look for higher quality customers, or if you're already doing that kind of work, you can retain those customers much better than if you continue to print what the press wants to print rather than what the customer wants. So there's a lot of benefits there from a customer service perspective and a sales perspective. But also, if you're printing right first time, the job is ready to go as soon as you start printing. So there's a lot less in terms of waste. Now, in terms of sheets and things like that, we're not talking offset numbers for waste, but the materials are quite a lot more expensive. And what we don't want to do is find out that the roll of self-adhesive vinyl that costs £200 or £400 that we've just printed has to be thrown away and reprinted because it wasn't right. If we delivered it to the customer and the customer was unhappy with that, we could lose that customer as a result. But we're most likely going to lose the profit on that job and several other jobs that we do after it as well. So there's all sorts of benefits that can happen if people invest, as Paul says, in a small amount of money and actually use the software. Okay, the software is not going to do anything if you don't use it. So,
and I think also if you're considering the march towards full automation, then knowing that you can trust your process is absolutely invaluable. Knowing that your color is consistent, right, and capable means that you have the confidence through automation to just start throwing files at it in much larger numbers. Without that assurance, you're throwing yourself open to far more risk. So I think that's an important added benefit. Okay, let's move on to the third part, which is how does it work? I mean, that's the important thing here is how does it work? So Fred, I think this one is going to be in your camp for you to start off, please.
Okay, well, we try to make the software as simple as possible. From that point of view, we support pretty much all of the spectrophotometers currently on the market, whether they're handheld or automatic. We also try to integrate with as many different presses as possible where they have inline or automatic scanning systems. We had a demonstration on a HP Indigo at the last Drupa where I think it was an Indigo 12,000 had an inline spectro. It was printing and the data was just coming off automatically. So, however you capture the data, we try to make it as quick and simple as possible. But ultimately, what we need to do is we need to measure a color bar with a device, and then we need to be able to quickly compare that data from the target and the measurement, and then decide whether it's right or not. So I've done a quick run through of starting the software and doing a measurement. So if I start sharing my screen, Graeme.
Yeah, but just before you do, so
yep.
The integration with RIPS. So I'm right in thinking that if you're capturing the data with an inline spectro and you're using, say, EFI software, you integrate with quite a few front ends. Is that correct?
Quite a lot in terms of the conventional offset. side of things, because that's where the software started. We do support Onyx, Caldera, EFI Fiery XF, the latter more for proof verification. It's more about whether the RIP will allow you to import a correction file that changes the dot gain on the machine, rather than whether it's something we would like to be able to do or not, if you see what I mean. Not a lot of
Sure.
Digital RIPs actually allow you to import a file like you would do on a CTP RIP.
Whereas if you're a screen printer using a RIP to do film output or screen exposure, you've got a much higher chance of that integrating, I would think.
Yeah, most of the screen printers that I've been involved with used a Harlequin-based RIP, as far as I remember, with whatever output device they had. So whether it was hot wax or the UV-based processes and stuff, it was still a Harlequin front end. And as we used to sell those, that was the first RIP we ever supported with the software. And all of that integration still works very well. So
Harlequin's from Global Graphics, right?
That is correct. I mean, there are different Harlequins, but they all pretty much work in the same way as far as I remember.
Okay, cool, thank you. All right, well, look, let's come on to the fourth part, which is you're going to show us, Fred, PressSign print by in operation. So I'm going to, again, hand over to you. Sorry, Paul, I'm not ignoring you. We can make your observations as we go through the next bit. All right, Fred.
Okay, so I'll just take a second to share my screen. So I've actually done a screen record, and I will kind of narrate it as we go through. So before I start, the first thing to say is that there are 4 different versions of PressSign. What we'll be focusing mainly on in this quick run through, it's only about 4 minutes long, but the version we'll start with is the print by version, which is actually the cheapest, but it's pretty much the most relevant for digital, because most of the time in the digital environment, we just want to find out whether it's right or wrong. And that's what the print buyer wants to find out as well, which is why we called it the print buyer version. So if I roll VT, you'll see that I'm going to enter my password. It's a server client architecture, so we can have one server and lots of different client computers. Now, I have a device connected in the background, which is the Konica Minolta Miro 1. So it's automatically connected and then calibrated. I'm then going to start a job. So to speed things up a bit, I've got a template for wide format inkjet, which pre-selects a lot of different settings. So I add my job number, and then if I need to, I can change the press target because I've got an uncoated print. Now, if I just pause for a second, the press target in PressSign contains both the target designations for all of the color criteria we want to know about. So lab values for the solids, dot gains for the TVIs, gray balance, separations, and things like that. But it also contains the way we want to score that information. So the tolerances we want to use, and because we have a scoring system, how many points we should gather if we're within tolerance. Other job criteria I've got are various different press configurations, which I can customize. I can use pretty much any color bar there is out on the market. So I've got the Fogra Media Wedge, which is relevant for digital. And then I can also add metadata about the job. So what resolution the press is being run at, and the quality setting. So in terms of the number of passes, but again, that's customizable. You can add whatever metadata you want. So I've started the job, and now I need to take the measurements. So it's a multi-line chart. So there's 3 lines, which means I have to do 3 measurements with the Konica, which works very similarly to the i1 Pro that a lot of people will have as well. And this is probably a good point to ask if anyone has anything to say in between, because it takes a little while for me to.
Do you have any observations? I know that you've used this this software. Anything you'd like to share?
Yes, I mean, it is very easy to use. Fred would need about 2 hours to go through every possible option on it. But once it's set up, it's very easy to use and it's very flexible. You can use any one of nearly 24 different spectrophotometers. You can use a big color bar like Focal Media Wedge, or a small PressSign color bar on the edge of the sheet. And it is possible to get a color bar on most jobs. So it's very quick and easy to do a reading. If Fred hadn't been explaining all of this as he went along, to open up a preset job, read the smallest color bar and get a report on your printing probably takes 2 minutes. And that's probably exaggerating. So it's very flexible.
Okay, great. All right, Fred, I can see that your targets are all now red, and there's a score up in the top right-hand corner. Perhaps you'd like to carry on.
Yep. So I paused it just after I'd calculated the score, just to let Paul finish. The screen we're looking at the moment is the color bar window, so we can see each patch across the chart as printed and measured. And if I wanted to, I could point at any of those patches within that window, and I would get all the information for the target and the measurement. But as a snapshot, you can see where there are issues. So the solid magenta, for example, is much darker than it should be. You can see the difference in color between the target and the printed kind of diagonal corners of the patch. Yeah. If I carry on from there, we'll go back to the summary screen, which then gives me the delta E's. So top right hand corner, we have an overall percentage of 57%, which isn't very good at all. That is broken down into different scoring criteria that you can see just underneath that, which uses a traffic light system. So the default target I'm using for essentially FOGRA 47, the scoring system is red under 60%, light green between amber between 60 and 70, light green between 70 and 80, and then a dark green above 80. So we can get a quick view of where the problems are just from that traffic light, that key criteria area in the right-hand corner. Underneath that, in the bottom right-hand corner, we have the delta E's as a quick kind of synopsis of the delta E's for solids, the paper, overprints, trap percentage if we're scoring that. We've got gray balance in there, and also TBI values if we're interested in that as well. Along the bottom, we've actually got ink corrections that are calculating how to improve the solid colors by changing the ink. Now, I'm using my NFR copy, which is the full version. In the print buyer version, it would only say whether the color is in or out, because at £640, it's priced because you don't get everything that the software can do.
Sure.
But it's got most things that digital printers would need. If I carry on, then we've got a summary of the strip that's been measured. The top left-hand corner is what we call the color inspector window, where you can see the numbers. If I just go back very slightly. And then the main part of the window is configurable to the user's preference. So in digital, we added a spider web view of a Scilab plot. So we can see the color change of each ink throughout the tint range from paper to solid.
Is there a 3D rendering as well?
There is. That's slightly later in the run through, but yeah, we can look at a 3D plot of that in a different window. Moving on, just in this window, we can look at a Gracol, a G7 type grey balance tint ramp for the neutral print density curve, which is important for that market. And then more for the conventional market, you have dot gain curves, which personally I still think are relevant in digital, because we can see there that the dot gains on that job are too high all the way across the board. Now, from a digital point of view, we're not really physically printing dot gain. That's not really how it works, but we are simulating that with the profiles and things that you've chosen in your workflow. If they're not printed accurately, it means the grey balance could be wrong. It means the mixes, the process colors could be wrong. So what can we do about that? A quick relinearization might bring that in, and therefore you don't have to spend hours reprofiling. Or if that doesn't work, then obviously there's other things that might need to be done. So if I just carry on rolling forwards, as we support lots of handheld devices that can only take a single measurement, we can, patch by patch that is, we've got a window for those kind of measurement devices where you can do dot gain or standard color difference calculations, and different ways of looking at the data as well. So we've got the 3D view as well, as you can see. So that in a nutshell, there are lots of other things we can do, but in a nutshell, that's what most users would do on a daily basis.
And I think, Fred, the thing is, anyone who has an interest in further detail can reach out to you after the session today. And you know, I really appreciate you trying to give us a manageable walkthrough, given the time that we've allocated. It's very difficult to do something completely comprehensive in a very short space of time. But I think you've given us a really useful insight. So thank you for that. And I think what we should do next is move on to verification and certification. I think before, I know, Fred, you've got a PDF report that you're going to show us that can be output from PressSign. But I think, Paul, maybe briefly, you could just reinforce the reasons for verifying and certifying.
Yes, I think we've seen very graphically from Fred's recorded demo that if you read, you know, one of the color bars down the side of your textiles, down the side of your signage, and found it was that far out, at the very least, it would stop you printing the other 20.
Yeah.
And then it would give you, with a little experience, the knowledge on how to put it right. As Fred rightly says, unless you're a screen printer, you can't easily do curves. So the first thing to do is look at the characterization and linearization calibration of your press, which you might be doing once a day anyway, but it might have dropped out for some reason. You might suddenly have a batch of inks which aren't quite as good colorized as the batch they replace. You could have head problems, but it points you in these directions. And the first and most important thing it does to you is tell you to stop,
Yeah.
which is interesting. I mean, the top end of PressSign, I'm cutting across Fred here, is I think is PressSign GPS. Is it called, Fred?
Global print management.
Global print
where
management.
We start connecting a print vendor's server to a brand manager's service.
That
Brand
gives
manager,
automatic reporting.
Yeah, so you're automatically reporting every time you make a scan, and that could be a scan on an offset press running at 20,000 sheets an hour, and it has the ability to report back live to the buyer. And if
when you think about how
he will
much
be on the phone and saying, "Have you stopped?" But you've got that ability to do it yourself in a £700 piece of software plus a densitometer. You will stop, you will recalibrate, and you may reprofile. I mean, yeah, profiling can take an hour or two. It can only take 10 minutes, depending upon the system you've got. But it gives you the ability to diagnose what's happening and put it right, and very quickly check it again. Because all you've got to do is take one more print, and if you're scoring over 80 or 90%, then you will get an excellent visual match and an excellent match to any proofs you may have sent your client.
Thank you, Paul. I think, okay, Fred, maybe now's a good moment to show us one of the PDF output reports. I think we're going to have to watch the time a little because it's, as always, the clock's always ticking. So I know that you've got a fully featured report, but maybe you can draw our attention to the highlights, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Just share my application.
Okay.
So, as you said, I've created a custom report which includes pretty much every type of page that we can create. It's not normal to do this, but it's just to demonstrate what is possible in a PDF compared to the standard the standard PDF. PDFs can be customized with company logos. You can create custom versions to include all or not very much data, depending on what you want. So we have a title page with some basic information. If there was an image file of the job, that would be placed in the top left-hand corner. I forgot about doing that, actually. We then have a contents page of where various pages are, a summary page of the job information, so the name of the job, who it was printed by, the press, the type of paper and ink, the measurement device, and its configuration as well. So if you're using M1, it would say M1 in there. Client name, number of measurements, and importantly, the press targets being used as well. At the bottom of the page, we have the overall job score, which would be the average if there were multiple measurements in the job. Following that, we have a summary of the measured and target LAB information and delta E's for the solids within the job. So if there was a spot color in there, that would be included. We can assess processed versions of spot colors as well. So for the digital market, you can create a color bar with a spot color in it, and you can create a processed version of that spot color within the software. You measure it, it gets scored like a spot color. So if there's a brand color in there, you can still say to the brand manager, we printed your brand color at 2 delta E or whatever, which is quite important in that market.
Yeah, useful.
Moving on, as I said, with the print buyer version, you would only get in or out on this page. It's showing us really where the color falls relative to the target. So we have a target, kind of the circular target line around the crosshair. The crosshair is the target. The dot is what we've measured.
Yeah.
Number of measurements in the job. We have TVI on this page. So as I said, I still think it's a valid metric for digital, even though it's something we're not physically altering. We're doing it in the color management.
I think, as you said earlier, the cue to, giving you the prompt to relinearize is a useful one anyway, because it just brings things back. Sorry, carry on.
Yep. And then we have the NPDC window for the G7 market. If we want to include it, there's a one-page summary, which a lot of people wanted. Some people were unhappy that we changed the layout of the PDF, so we added that back in just as a quick way of exporting some trend histograms. And then more for the proofing verification market, you can have a list of all of the different patches in the color bar, the data and the delta E's for those. So that's pretty much everything you can fit into a PDF report. You can obviously give that back to a customer in whatever format you want, depending on what they want to know.
That's great. Thank you, Fred. I think it's been, you know, in our previous discussions, we've relied more on discussion than showing things through recordings and demonstration. But in this case, I think it'd just be impossible to cover that kind of sense of your the software and its value in any other way. So appreciate you putting the time into it. I think we're now, thank you both for really interesting answers. I think, you know, from my perspective, never more was there a time than to get into qualifying your process control objectively rather than subjectively. The kind of, just because the printer thinks it's right doesn't make it so. I think the tools that you've presented here really do go a long way towards being able to support a contract-based relationship, and I think there's great value in that. And whilst maybe the offset commercial sector is, you know, more mature in respect to this type of process control, I think that as any industry develops and becomes more mature, needs to do things faster and more efficiently, then these tools really come into their own. So thank you so much for that. I think we've got an opportunity now for me to have a look at the Q&A. I'm not sure that we're going to have.
Graeme, just to be. Mr. Paul was a very eager beaver and went ahead and answered some of them. Okay, so if you click in the Q&A and if you go to, I think maybe there's two that haven't been answered, but there are some that have been answered, which perhaps you guys can go in a bit more detail, but I'll let you choose which ones. There's 2 open, 3 answered, but if you could perhaps, the ones that are answered, maybe go in a bit more detail if you want to.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. I appreciate the heads up. And Paul, you know, I could be critical for you being keen to help, but why would I be? So thank you. I'm looking now at the Q&A, and there's one question here from an anonymous attendee who's just asking whether previous coffee breaks are available if you weren't able to attend them. And yes, of course they are. You just need to go to FESPA TV on YouTube and you'll find them there. And at the beginning and at the end, you'll see the participants' email contact details if you want to get in touch and reach out for any further questions. We have 3 that Paul has answered. Okay, I think Hassan Ratra, thank you for your questions. I think that I think I'm in agreement with Paul that color bleeding on textile clothing is beyond the scope of today's session. You may want to reach out to me by email and I might be able to signpost you towards someone that can help. And Ryan Downend has asked, would this work with textiles with many variations in natural substrates and a finishing process to contend with? Again, I think is a really good point. I think the white point changes batch to batch in textile are far more, there's far more variation there in natural cloths for production and color management. So I think you may have to implement a white point correction on each batch of cloth, perhaps before bringing it in line. But yes, I think with some extra effort, I don't see why that isn't viable. And certainly if you have any kind of questions, probably the best thing to do at the end of this, I'm going to share Fred's and Paul's email addresses as well as my own, and, you know, feel free to get in touch. And I think, oh, there's one more from Hassan, which is actually about printing lighter colors on dark materials. Again, I think it kind of goes beyond this, the scope of this, but if you want to reach out to me at FESPA, then, you know, we can do that. Okay, well, look, I think remarkably, we've only overrun a little amount, which is quite impressive, really, for my usual control. So I'd say, sadly, it's nearly all we've got time for today. Thank you for participating, and please come back and join us in the new year for the next coffee break, where we'll focus again on the role of sustainability, and in this case, its implementation in transfer printing using recycled polyester transfer media from Covemi and bioinks from Epta Inks in Italy. That registration link will be sent out shortly. If you're interested in watching this webinar, please feel free to check our YouTube channel, FESPA TV, where it can be found from either tomorrow or the day after, but it will be there, I promise you. As I'm sure you're all aware, now that the FESPA Global Print Expo, due to be held in March next year, will now take place between the 12th and 15th of October at the RAI in Amsterdam. We have a survey that will be sent to you following today's coffee break. If you would please take time out and return that to us with your comments, it would be greatly appreciated. You know, we need feedback, and we want to make these ever more relevant and useful to you. So please get some feedback through to us. I'm now going to share again with you the slides for our panelists today, so that you can see our email addresses and names and what have you. So I know that you know, Fred is really able and willing to assist on anyone that has further interest in the PressSign software. And when it comes to all things color management, I think Paul is hugely experienced and very able. So do feel free to be in contact with them. I think if it's not too early, I'm going to take this opportunity to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a far, far better year ahead. So I don't know whether Paul and Fred, whether you'd like to say anything before we go.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for the second opportunity, Graeme.
Always a pleasure. So thank you all for attending, and yeah, I hope you all have a really great holiday. I'm sure you all deserve it. All right, take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.